to the Rural Crime Prevention channel. I hope this finds you well. It's Richard Wade on Monday, the 8th of July, 2024. And in the next video, the next little chat that we're going to do live online, I'd like to bring in a chartered security professional who has a vested interest in rural crime and all things crime prevention. So what I'd like to do is welcome to the screen Frank Cannon and bring you live onto our feed, Frank, and say good morning and welcome, Frank. How are you doing? And as a very brief introduction, if I may, now that you're on the screen, just to let people know that you've got quite a career, a long and illustrious career in crime prevention, including service in the British Army as a Royal Military Police person. Starting off in the ranks, going on to becoming commissioned, and now, of course, you spend your life working in rural crime. So, Frank, welcome, and thank you so much for sparing the time to join us. How are you doing? And let everyone know a little bit about yourself and where you're joining us from.
Yeah, morning, Rich. Thanks very much for the opportunity. I suppose I spend all my day, every day, looking at crime reduction, making sure that people get a safe place to live, work, rest, and play. I'm talking to you today from Wiltshire. Not sunny. It's not sunny.
Same.
Well, I look to my left over my backfield, and it's beautiful countryside. It's where I currently live. I'm originally from the Fens. I spent the first 16 years growing up and living on a farm, working on a farm, and then I joined the army in 1982. I joined the army, so that will age me a little bit. But I went in as a boy soldier, did a full career. Absolutely thoroughly enjoyed it. And then when I left the army, I went into big construction overseas, and then most recently back in Somerset as head of security at the Hinkley Point C new nuclear construction site. So I'm used to being around and surrounded by a lot of people, a lot of open spaces as well, but also big equipment. And I think that construction industry also has taught me a lot of lessons that I can now apply into the rural communities.
That's very interesting. So we have a similar vintage. So I also joined the British Army in '82 as well. So that's really quite interesting. I just want to, before we go on and talk about crime and your take on crime, whilst we're talking rural crime, I think it's a great chance here because of the similarities. Let's make sure we don't miss out the construction side of it as well, because I think that's quite relevant, particularly for larger agribusinesses, larger estates, and larger farming enterprises. They do a lot of construction work, and in particular these days, as you well know, they're often diversifying and building new buildings and adapting existing ones, and that risk of opportunistic crime for plant and equipment is very much there. Before we start talking crime, though, let's have a little chat, if we may, as people will see on the screen, optimal risk. You're here today as part of that organisation, so I think it would be remiss not to let's promote optimal risk and just tell us about the setup briefly, and what the main aims of optimal risk are all about.
Yeah, so Optimal Risk is a consultancy business. We have many different arms. We've got 3 different companies. We're a group, so Optimal Risk Group. And we look at protecting people and their businesses. So high net worth individuals on their rural estates. We do vulnerability, security risk and vulnerability assessments of their premises to make sure that they are safe. We test them with our penetration testing teams to go and make sure that we can identify opportunities to improve on their defences. We also have a training arm where we run many different training courses, and you can look at any web browser and search for us, and you'll find us there. But we're a group of chartered security professionals that have come together. We're like-minded people. We come together and we provide advice and guidance to those people at risk. When I talk about risk, I'm talking about adversarial risk. So these are bad people that go out intentionally to do harmful things. And we are effectively your conscience, your guide, your professional advisor to help try and close down some of those vulnerabilities that you may face, both in a business sense and a personal sense.
Well, I like what you said there, because if I'm hearing you correctly, it will lead on very nicely to later on in the presentation, where I know you talk extensively about a layered approach to this risk management, and in this instance, our risk is crime and people committing crimes. Maybe not just stealing equipment. There are a lot of other crimes that we'll talk about later to have on our radar. To make sure we don't fall foul of those as well. But that layered approach is really, really important, because, you know, as well as I, and for everyone out there listening, you know, there's no one thing that will stop crime happening. There has to be a multifaceted approach, and perhaps we'll go into those layers later on, because I'm particularly I can't wait till we get to talk about your cheese and onion crisps and your onions and things. So we'll get the graphics up later, Frank, as well for that. So if we bring the focus back to rural crime itself, then what are we seeing? What's the key issues around rural crime lately? What do people need to be on the lookout for?
Yeah. So, I mean, those that live in the rural community know they don't need me to lecture or to explain the actual risks themselves, but I'll just run through a menu of what I believe the biggest concerns are within the rural communities. And the center of this is about trespass. Right. Trespass. Now, this is a civil offence. You know, it's not a criminal offence, unless, of course, you are a designated site. Then there is an actual offence called criminal trespass. But mostly it's unauthorised people gaining entry to an area that they're not typically allowed to go to commit various illicit activities. And I mean, the most obvious is theft, isn't it? The theft or damage, malicious damage to equipment. But you also got arson, so that's damage through fire with intent. That's not accidental. That's arson. That's with intent. But you have the activists that come onto a site, the animal rights, or somebody that come and causing you challenges. These are people that are coming on with intent to commit a crime. But you could have the wildlife crime, which it's not a massive thing, and it's incredibly difficult to deter or to eradicate. But it's still there. Hare coursing, of course, people come onto your land to use hare coursing, not for the love of the chase, but it's actually the illicit and overseas international betting circles that prosper from hare coursing. Fly tipping, scourgeable country. It's beautiful countrysides, and then people choose to dump their rubbish in the green space that we have, which is not good, and it's also is not good environmentally as well as aesthetically pleasing. But it's just annoyance, and we, the rural community, have to lift and remove it. You got the people that are off-roading, you know, whether it be on dirt bikes or Land Rovers, and they cut across your crops because they're just having fun rallying around in their cars. And where I live, very close to Salisbury Plain, we have a challenge with people doing that, and we do elsewhere. But then there's the sort of almost ignorance, the animal worrying with careless dog owners. Now, we love to see our animals, both dogs and wild animals, enjoy the countryside, but they must do this under control. And, you know, where we put up our signs to identify to dog owners, dog walkers, that, you know, our flock are vulnerable at certain times of the year. We would really like them to adhere to our guidance and advice.
Interesting.
But all of this is about people coming onto our land, isn't it?
Yeah.
So there's lots of, I'm sure there's lots of other things that concern farmers when they're working, and our landed estate owners when they're working in their land. But those are the ones that I've sort of identified.
They're the key ones, and I think you've hit it right on the head there. So it's people coming onto others' land to commit acts, and in some cases do what seems like a bit of fun, but it's not, is it? Because it's like hare coursing. You mentioned the link to organised betting, and I think often in rural crime that's something that's missed. It's talking at length in the research by the likes of Kate Tudor, Carmel Rooney from Australia, and various others, that there are direct links, very clear links to rural crime, and highly organized international criminal gangs involved in drugs, people trafficking, sex trafficking, and all of those things. And on the surface, it looks like a few tractors being nicked or some GPS units, but it's much, much bigger than that. And that's the worrying thing. But even the ones you've spoken about there, if we take fly tipping as a classic example. Now, in my previous existence working for insurance brokers for many, many years, this is a huge problem for people, and people unwittingly, as you well know better than I, people unwittingly at a household level let someone take away their rubbish and their stuff. Next thing you know, it's dumped in a lane or it's dumped on a landowner's field. And of course, they then, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the landowner then collars the cleanup costs and all the rest of it at that point.
Yeah,
yeah. So there's a massive cost and time.
And if it's hazardous waste, as in, you know, construction waste, asbestos roof sheets or whatever, it's that challenge of the environmental cleanup. It's not just a cleanup; it's the environmental element of the cleanup and the rules that once you know it's hazardous, you then have to comply with the rules, and it's challenging.
Yeah, you really do take on all the big problems of compliance and everything there. It's an absolute nightmare. Worth mentioning there, Frank, again, having worked in that industry for many, many years, predominantly in a risk management fashion, but obviously aware of what's going on in the insurance world. For any landowners, agricultural businesses and farmers out there, you can buy insurance to cover the cleanup costs for people people dumping rubbish on your land. The hair coursing one, it's a similar kind of thing, isn't it? Again, it's that disruption, and we'll go on how we can aim to prevent these things later on when we start looking at the layers of protection that people like you and others at Optimal Risk recommend to businesses and rural communities. But it's not just it appears like a bit of fun, people racing their dogs and chasing rabbits. But again, there's crop damage. There's normally some kind of criminal damage to get into the land, busting fences or ripping out hedges. So it's a real nightmare. With this rural crime, is there an issue relating to violence as well? Does it normally come attached to violence, or is that not something to be concerned about?
So there's a concern, but let me just take a step back a bit.
Yeah,
there's two words that are really worthwhile defining. The first one is the threat, the adversarial threat. So where is that cause of danger, that cause of harm coming from, and who is it who is a threat to us? So the threat definition is so I just lost my train of thought there. I just saw something in my background of my screen. Sorry. The threat is the intent and capability of those people that mean to do bad things. So the intent is their state of mind, their mens rea. Yeah. What is it they're doing when they come onto our property? And the capability is, can they actually do what they want to do? So if we've got somebody that's presenting a threat to us, but actually they live in Argentina and we're in the UK, then it's quite difficult for them to actually come and deliver their threat that they claim they're going to be. So we need to understand that we should learn to know who our threat actors are. Who are the bad guys that's likely to come and cause us a problem on our farms? And that people tend to break rules for one of three reasons, right? They're ignorant to the fact that they are breaking a rule or that they are acting outside of what we would expect them to act. So that's ignorance. The second one is that they know that they shouldn't do it, but they momentarily have a lapse of concentration, or they're distracted, or they're focusing on something that seems to be more important than following the rules. And the third one is with intent. And this is the people that we want to look at the most, is the intent. So people that are capable and have that intent. And then we need to start studying what their attack methodologies are, their modus operandi. How do they attack? What is it that they're trying to do? What will they do? How far will they go to achieve their goal? Let's say I'm going to come onto your farm and nick your quad. right? So can I do it? Probably I can. What do I need to do it? Maybe I need a trailer, or I need the ability to make sure that I can start it and drive it away to a trailer or to the back of my van to get it away. So you start planning out how they are thinking, and then you can start thinking about defending. The second thing is the second definition. So that's threat. That's the bad guys. We need to know about what they're like, all about them, as much as we can find out about them.
Yeah.
Bad guys. The next one then is risk, and risk is the likelihood and the consequence of those bad guys coming onto our farm. So are they likely to come and attack us? And if they do attack us, what's the consequence to me, to my family, and to my business plan? What do I need to be able to deliver what my farm is trying to produce or grow? So threat and risk, they're two totally different things, but they're obviously very, very closely linked together. So harm. Are we at risk? When we live in our farm, are we at risk? So mostly those raw criminals, they don't want to cause injury to people. They don't. They want to come in. It's mostly acquisitive in nature. So that means that they're either going to come and steal something to sell it, to take it away and sell it, or in hare coursing, they're going to come onto your land to pursue a sport in their eyes that they're able to make money off on online streaming. So they're not coming on with a degree of attacking you. But of course, some people may resort to violence if they are trapped or if they are caught in the act. So if you go out there and pin somebody in the corner of your barn, it's like a rat. It will attack to get away.
Sure.
So you've got to be really, really cognizant of how what you do when you realise somebody's on your farm that shouldn't be there. And the best course of action is not to be that vigilante. The best course of action is to better tin than skin. One of the farmers said to me a couple of months ago. Better tin than skin. Let them take your quad bike because you don't want them to take your life or cause you a challenge.
So very true.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I was chatting to a chap, Richard, on last Tuesday. Actually, I had a fantastic couple of days in Bedfordshire, and I spoke to a farmer, and he was telling me about how he operates his farm, and it's a very diverse farm. And the central thing, the glue that held it all together, was him. He was the expert in all of those different systems he had, and he had a biomass process where he created enough electricity to run his farm and also to serve 360 houses in the local village. Right, he was the only person that knew how to press all the buttons and make sure that the operating system worked. Right, he was the only person that fed the animals on the farm. So him presenting himself to a person that's on his farm, so a trespasser, and then being injured, that actually has a massive impact on that ability of that farm to deliver on its business plan.
It's so very true.
It's not just the physical harm; it's the impact to the business.
It's an interesting point to make that, and I'd like to expand on that if I may slightly, because when people are presented with crime in action, particularly in that rural environment, I guess there's a perception of your castle's being invaded, really. There's someone on my land. There's someone trying to get my stuff. And if my family are here, I guess that automatic reaction, it's not the right reaction, in my opinion, but that automatic reaction is, right, protector, savior, grab my stick, grab my torch, let's go and confront these individuals. There are many, many, many examples, and again, in all of the data. So, and all of the research done from Northumbria University, Durham University, University of New South Wales, and Dublin Technical University, relating to the commission of rural crime and those being caught in the act, will use violence where required. And just like you said, if they're cornered, it's that fight or flight. They know if they stay, they're going to get caught, and they're probably going to go to prison or other sanctions. So they will fight, strike out. And I'm so glad you mentioned, I often talk about business continuity and the ability for businesses to carry on after adverse events, whatever that adverse event might be. And in this case, it's that key person being attacked or injured. And even if they're not physically injured, they may have mental scarring and other associated anxiety and stress problems as a result of an interaction with a person committing a crime. Skin and tin, love that. I'm gonna nick that in the future.
So that's come from the community, because you know,
brilliant.
They're pretty, you know, the older generation, and this chap's sort of in his early 80s.
Says it all, and
yeah,
let it, you know, at the end of the day, if my choice is there's someone stealing my quad bike, okay, I can get aggressive, shout and fight the person stealing my quad bike, and that's risky. That's really risky. Or I can let them steal my quad bike, and I'll live to fight another day, and the chances are I'm going to be insured and I'm going to get a replacement. So it's that instant risk management decision, and hopefully people will adopt the right one. Later on, Frank, I'm actually going to show a little video right at the very end of exactly the scenario you and I have just been talking about. I'd be really so that's fantastic. Cheers for that bit. And I'd be really intrigued when we're talking about the perpetrators of rural crime, and maybe we can include the construction related crime in this as well. Who's doing it? Do we know who it is? Is it a certain group or demographic?
So Dr. Kate Tudor really did educate us when she presented the findings of her report, and the National Rural Crime Network published her report, and they also came up with 10-point plan on how to try and reduce it. So remember, we've had this conversation before, Rich. I don't use the word prevent. I use the word reduce, because to prevent crime, or to try and prevent crime, you'll always fail, because I wish we could, but we can't. So we just look at different things to reduce crime. So Dr. Kate said that it's organised crime gangs that are the biggest challenge for us. And those are the people that were willing to travel 350 miles to come and take your quad and whatever else you've left in your barn, and go and flog it. And they probably, most certainly, already have a way of getting rid of it. So they have a good business crime model. And they are very intelligent people. They plan incredibly well. They will use the internet and open source information to determine whether your farm is an attractive target. So we always have to be careful in the crime reduction world of alerting people to their vulnerabilities without alarming them to a point where they're fearful and they live in fear. Because there's two types of crime. There's the actual crime, then there's the fear of crime. And both of those are corrosive to the way that we enjoy our life. And remember, I mean, I live definitely, and I think you do, which we live in this world of bad people. So we have a sort of a really slanted tint to our spectacles when we look at this sort of thing. But in the main, we have a beautiful countryside. It's predominantly safe. But we are vulnerable. So these dudes, these bad guys, they will travel, they will plan, they will target, and we need to understand how they do that. And Kate Tudor and others, they help us understand that. And then, of course, there's the experience that we gain in our many years of fighting crime. So there's a picture that I sent over to you, Richard, and I'd like to look at the attack kit of those that would likely come onto our farm, and if we can just flash that up, and I'll talk through that, and then I'll ask you to think like your enemy. Those people that are watching this today or will watch it later on. It's about putting yourself in the mindset of those people that are likely to come onto your farm, and understand what success looks like for them. And I'd like you to walk a mile. I'd like you to walk around your farm.
I'm just gonna
and ask you to look at your farm the way that they would look at it. So it's the next slide along, Richard. That's the one here. So look at this, right? So this is the typical attack kit that I've determined that those organised crime gangs are likely to use. So, you know, top left-hand corner these people are surveillance aware. So when somebody suggests to you that you whack up some cameras,
Yeah.
you've got to think about what is it you are going to capture? What images are you going to capture from those cameras? Now, cameras are absolutely part of the solution. But what you'll see is on the left-hand side, you will see people with some form of mask on that's covering their facial features.
Yeah.
You might be able to identify distinctive clothing, but they predominantly wear black or dark. So because they are surveillance aware, because they've watched all the CSI programs, the same as what you and I have.
Yeah.
I don't watch them so much now, but you know, the advent of television and the advent of the internet and the availability of information, they use that to reduce their chances of getting caught when they're committing their illicit business. So then you've got the actual physical tools that they use to breach some of your defenses. So the yellow bolt croppers, you know, if they can get the teeth of those bolt croppers around your padlock, then your padlock is not worth buying.
Yeah.
You know, you've got to look at things like shrouded padlocks, or you know, the good quality padlocks where they make sure that you can't get the bolt croppers into them to chop them off, because effectively that's their universal key. The crowbar is very much the same. The design of the way that you have your protective measures in place, if there's any chance of them leveraging it off, then they're going to do it. The tool is actually designed to do that. And that actual website where I took the bolt croppers from, the very next picture along was them cropping off a padlock.
Yeah.
It's sold to do that. So you've got to think about that. So full shackle padlocks, and that means that the top of the padlock is protected, or a you know, a closed padlock is what you. So look at the quality of the padlock. Then there's the screw, the portable screwdriver on the top right there. The power, the batteries that we put on our utility tools now are meant for you can use them utility. You can use them anywhere at any time, as long as they're charged up. That becomes a weapon for those bad people, right? So if you look at your padlock, where you got your padlock, and the asp that you've got over the padlock, you don't have to attack the padlock if you can just unscrew 4 screws.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, so you just take the asp off. Your padlock's still on there. You know, so you buy a 80 quid padlock, but actually, you know, four 1-inch Phillips screws, and you're in.
Exactly.
So you've got to look at it from that perspective. And you know, they're going to bring the biggest tool they've got is the one at the bottom there, the tipper vehicle or the transit van. That's their means to facilitate crime. So whatever they nick from you, they're going to throw into that.
Yeah.
If they're having to trudge across a couple of your fields to get to their truck that's parked in a lay-by, they're only taking what they can carry or what they can drive themselves. So stop that vehicle coming onto your property, and you will eradicate 85–90% of all crime, or any meaningful crime. So it's about, how do you stop that vehicle getting on? And these are the tools that they need, remember, to be successful. So if you walk around the yard, and I've seen a couple of Rich's videos actually on his website, which is fantastic. If you walk around and look at it through the lens of a criminal, you'll be in a better position.
I think that's a really good point. 2 really good points to make, because the kit that's available is really, it's very cheap. It's universally available, and you know, your Makitas and your Stills, and they're little portable tools now. Literally, that's what they're designed for, isn't it? They go through anything, and of course the criminals have got these in their arsenal, and they're in unless we've. But again, it's going back to what you said at the get-go. It's a multi-layered approach. Even in that short space there, Frank, you talked about denial of access for the vehicle, thinking about the correct padlock, thinking around the thickness of the actual mechanism itself, but then more importantly, and this is often overlooked, the best security device in the world held on by some tiny little screws. What's the point? Zip, 2 seconds gone, or cut, and away you go.
People criticise IKEA furniture. You know, it's top quality furniture. But if the
Yeah.
person that assembles it doesn't assemble it very well, it's shit.
Yeah. That's right.
Your wardrobe falls over because you haven't assembled it. It's not about the quality of the build, because they're award-winning designers.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Yeah.
let's go on to that next picture then, Rich, because this is
Sure thing.
not that one, the next one, because
Yeah,
that's the one that I talked about.
let's just bring. I need
Yeah,
to make
okay.
that a bit
So
bigger.
that's
Bear with me while we
so
can.
those
There
bad guys that we've just determined what their toolkit is. This is the sort of thing that they'll want to do when they come onto your site, so onto your farm and or construction site actually. It's those people that come on without that authority, and that's the sort of things they'll do. And if you notice in the middle there, it's trespass. So if you can stop that white van, that tipper truck coming onto your
Yeah.
site,
Yeah.
your farm, then we're in a better position, aren't we? We feel more confident because we put some layers of defence in place.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
let's go to the next slide, mate, because I think the conversation is flowing naturally. That we'll talk
It's
about.
flown along really nicely, and some of these we'll come back to a couple of these later on, because they're really relevant. I particularly like this slide.
So this is about understanding that there's a lot of charlatans out there in my sector, unfortunately, in the security sector.
Right. Okay.
And what they'll do is they'll come in and they'll tell you that they know what your problem is, and they'll flog you something that they produce or something that they install, and they'll tell you that it's the best thing since sliced bread. And this is charlatan security. This is the fox guarding the hen house. So if you don't understand the quality of advisor that you need, or the people that have done their diligent research, that understand their craft, that they come onto your property, your farm, your construction site, and help you reduce that level of risk that you're exposed to. You wouldn't ask your local plumber to come and fix your electrics, unless, of course, they're multi-artisan. You wouldn't expect somebody that's just good with their pocket money to advise you on your business financial guidance and advice. So if you're looking at protecting your multi-million pound business, aka your farm, or your massive construction project, then why would you not bring somebody in that has the necessary experience to guide you to invest your capital expenditure to better protect your property?
No, it's a really important point, and if I can just jump in as well, that time that the landowner or the farm owner, the land, whatever, whoever it might be, the agribusiness owner, the person who's now going to engage somebody to advise on security, the time taken in that due diligence at the start is never ever wasted. And you've hit it right on the head, because if I've engaged the wrong organization with insufficient knowledge or experience, often is the case, to advise me correctly, I'm going to end up with a false sense of security. I'm going to go through life thinking, hey, it's all's well in the end house, when it's actually not, and I may be just as vulnerable, or I might have a level of naivety, thinking that this, you mentioned CCTV earlier, this wonderful CCTV system is going to be my protector, and when it's not, it's just going to show you later on all the kit that's been stolen, because the other layers of your security weren't actually up to scratch. So it's a really important thing to stress. And thanks so much for bringing that in.
Yeah, it is about that frame of mind, and it's about making sure that what you do spend your money on is actually worthwhile.
Yeah.
Because I again, last week I was on a farm. It happened to be a chicken farm, actually, but by chance. And they just spent a significant amount of money installing, probably, I didn't count them, but probably near 20 video cameras. They're called video surveillance systems now, of course, because what they do is they give you that remote ability to look at your property and your farm without having to get out of bed and go and have a look yourself. You can just tap into your phone.
Have a look,
But I think the advice that he'd been given was probably not correct. I think that with less money we could have achieved more, and I think that the purpose of installing the video surveillance system wasn't truly known by all. And I actually think that because there's a public footpath running through the farm, they may be outside of the legal requirement of installing video surveillance system, i.e., intentionally surveilling public space, which is against the Video Surveillance Commissioner's Code. And there was absolutely no intent to do that. You know, and to be honest with you, with a very slight tweak, I think that we can remove that allegation. But yeah, we do need to do it properly, and I'm not putting layers of bureaucracy in to make my profession more attractive or absolutely vital. I'm just, you know, many years of experience would tell me that if you design it in, it's much more cost effective than bolting it on afterward. If the horse is galloping down the lane, there's no real rush to run out and close the gate, is there? You know,
well, exactly, and it's got to be right, and again, often overlooked. And I've seen this in places where I've gone, and as you've seen, you know, I go sniffing around a lot of places with my camera and unannounced on the vast majority of those, and often overlooked in this approach to like security is the people themselves. So the people who work there, the landowner and his management or her management team, all the way down to people who are tending the land and looking after the animals and all the rest of it, they're often overlooked as a wonderful part of the security process, the eyes and ears on the ground. And often, you know, one of the things I'm always saying is you make use of that, get these people switched on and trained and briefed, knowing what to look for. And
behavior-based security, mate. I mean, I've got three areas. I've got rural crime, I do construction crime, and I do behavior-based security. And that's creating culture, a secure culture within the organisation or the family culture. And it's just tapping into all of those eyes.
Let's hone in on that a little bit, because I personally find that behavioural approach to it fascinating. It sort of dovetails wonderfully into what we do in the risk management world and the health and safety world. So if you're talking to people and anybody watching this going forward, when we say, well, a behavioural approach to security is what are we talking about, Frank?
So let's go on to just tap forward a couple of slides, and we'll go to the cheese and onion model. So that, by the way, just while we're on there, and we'll come back to that behavior-based stuff in a minute. These guys, these charlatan protective security, it doesn't exist, of course, it doesn't. It's a fictitious company that I've created to facilitate my storytelling. They all sell you snake oil. They all sell you things. You know, look at the strap line. Resolves 99% of all risk. You know, really? Does it? You know, it's a scam. But there are people out there that will sell you a solution, one solution to your crime reduction, and it's BS, mate. It is absolute BS. Actually, I wrote an article which is published talking about, and I think the National War Crime Network put it on LinkedIn as well. It's called "Taking the Bullshit Out of Farmyard Security."
Right. Okay. Cool.
And this is the bullshit. This is the charlatans that will come out there and flog you snake oil to resolve your challenges. And I don't think that it's true. You know, they all have their own part. Let's go on to the next slide, then, mate. And
as we jump in forward, what I will make sure anything that you talk about like that, Frank. So where there's links to public documents, when I go back in and put the description into this video on YouTube, I'll make sure we put links to, you know, where people can find you, optimal risk, any documents that you want.
Thank you for that, mate.
No, absolutely. That'll all be in the notes for sure. Let's.
So this is a concept that I've conceived, which is about safety and secure flavored behavioral based solutions. So this is about everything that we do from a safe or secure stance. And I know there's an organisation, relatively new, it's supported by DEFRA. I think it's partly funded by DEFRA, called the Institute for Agriculture and Horticulture, TIAH.
Yeah.
And they are starting to create storyboards. No, they're not. Sorry. Sorry, I create storyboards. They're starting to create toolbox talks. And the toolbox talks that they're creating are little bite-sized 5-minute learning sessions that you can, if you're just about to do a hazardous activity, you can revise your knowledge on how to do that. And Richard's actually got a fantastic website with a lot of links to these sorts of safe behaviors. Like, if you bring in a contractor onto the farm and they're working on a field that's got overhead power lines, the hazards associated with that. So what I've done is and this is born out of 15 years worth of being head of security for 3 mega construction projects. Is I've bought that cheese, the Swiss cheese, into and combined it with the onion medal. So I mean, I've obviously mocked up this particular crisp packet to look like something that you have seen in your local supermarket. And Rich was traveling back from London after one of his training seminars last week, and he was actually eating a bag of cheese and onion flavored crisps on the train. And he snapped a picture and sent it to me, and we both had a little bit of giggle.
The messaging worked, I'm telling you.
This is about converging two solutions to hazards. So next slide, mate, and I'll talk about it in a little bit more detail.
So
this is the Swiss cheese model, and what safety professionals say is that you can put many layers of protection, and you better back me up on this, Rich, or correct me, because this is your field of expertise. You can have many different layers of protection between you and the hazard. Right, the hazard is something that's going to cause you harm. It's probably going to injure you, or it could even fatally injure you. So if each of those layers are not foolproof, they're not 100% defense, and they all have holes in. So they use the cheese because it's got holes in it. Now, if those holes line up, then you can see, indicated by the red arrow, the hazard can still get through and impact the person that's supposed to be protected. So that's there's a lot of theory about the Swiss cheese model written by many different academics. So I just thought, that's a good idea there. I might just steal a bit of that. And of course, many of our farmers diversify now, and they produce cheese, all sorts of cheese. So I think it fits for this audience, I hope.
No, it does. It fits.
So let's talk about the onion then. So this is the onion, and you'll notice there that clearly I've sliced it. And when you look at the sliced onion, you can see that there's many different layers of defense. So by the way, the Capway is Cannon Asset Protections. That's my own company. The Capway is all of the ideas and knowledge and learning that I've built up over my 43 years now of security experience. I've documented in a thing called the Capway. And you notice there, though, that each layer isn't totally complete. So look at the graphic on that, and I'm going to show you one in a minute. But just before we do, at the centre of the onion, and many landowners and farmers will understand this, is that you might have a net of onions in the wash house at the back, or in the outhouse. That some of them look as if they're rotten, but actually, when you take off a couple of the outside layers, the core of the onion is still perfectly edible. It's perfectly okay. So you can still salvage, and the heart of that thing that you've grown is still succulent and would flavour any decent meal. So it's worthwhile. You can still use it. You're probably not getting the maximum volume because some of the outer layers have gone rotten, but it's still salvable. So we've used that salvageable. So we've used that analogy to try and communicate this story to you as farmers on how we protect our most critical and vulnerable assets, property on the farm. So how do we link that then to security? My next slide will tell you that. And I haven't actually created slides. These are just images that help tell the story. So the first thing is that the four, let's look at the 4 bits at the bottom, right? So deter, detect, delay, respond. This is our mindset from a defensive security perspective, is that everything or anything that we do must help support one of those qualities or one of those outcomes. We want to deter the attacker. We would love to make sure that he or she does not bother looking at your farm. They go elsewhere. They don't challenge your safe place. They leave you alone. Nothing to see here, governor, move along. That's what we want. We want them to go elsewhere, not come to you. We would love them not to go anywhere, but It's about survival of the fittest. So deter the attacker in the first place. And we'll talk about in a minute about what you can do, which are affordable and proportionate. Detect. We want to know if they're on our property. We want to know as early as possible. And you can see some obvious tools that would help us do that. But we want to detect them at the earliest time possible. And then what we want to do is put a number of barriers in between them, so we're delaying their ability to succeed. We want to slow them down. We want to cause them a challenge so they don't actually get to their target before we can respond. And that response is something that you think about in the clear light of day. You don't think about it at the time that you're being attacked, because there's this red mist that comes before you that means that you don't think wisely. And a lot of have-a-go heroes, unfortunately, get injured or lose their life because they are acting in this red mist mode, the fog of war, the thing that's going to make them think illogically and put themselves in harm's way. So, left-hand side, many layers of defense. That's okay. We're good then, aren't we? I've got all of these different layers of defense in place. No, not if you don't know the vulnerability or the weakness of each of those layers. Because all you'll do, unwittingly, is put the weakness side by side by side by side. I could go into a footballing analogy, but I'm conscious of time. But you've got to put your strength, you've got to put your strong defense where their strength is, right? So think about that in a footballing analogy, rugby, football, wherever. But on the left-hand side, you've got a lot of layers of defense. You spent a hell of a lot of money because each one of those layers will cost money, but you're still very vulnerable because all the weaknesses line up. Remember the Swiss cheese model. Go on the right-hand side now. Exactly the same layers of defense, right? But you just managed them differently. And look at that. Look at the time that it would take you now to get from the outer layer to the core of the onion. It's a lot more time, isn't it? So as they are working their way around that system through the maze to get to the center of the maze, you're buying yourself time. You're slowing them down. You're putting something in place that will hopefully help you detect. Whilst they're running around your maze to try and get to the center, they're triggering alarms. They're identifying themselves, or they're running through the field of view of cameras, or whatever. Or they just happen to be, making enough noise to alert your farm dogs or something. So that picture there, that's the onion skin.
That speaks absolute volumes. It really does.
What do we mean by layers then? So I'm not expecting you to read this. This is about demonstrating that through prior planning and thinking about it, you can put many layers in, and each of those layers provide one, two, or multiple elements to deter, detect, delay, and respond. Right. So, center of that graphic there is the thing that you are trying to protect, your quad bike. Right. And you work out. I'm not expecting landowners or farmers or our growers to start employing security force or a guard force, security officers. I'm not expecting you that. But remember, this is also works well for construction sites. But the first thing I understand, looking at the outside, is my legal position. What are my legal status? Can I put that big gate up and close it and padlock it and put up massive signs saying no entry? Or do I have to facilitate people coming onto my farm because I have a public footpath, I have a bridle path, I have a public right of way? So work from the legislation and go all the way through. These are the sorts of things that I would create. I would do the research and advise these giga project directors. That's my role. And what I want to do is bring some of that commercial knowledge into the rural environment. And if you only take 4 or 5 of these layers and put it onto your farm, you're better protected.
Yeah, it's a brilliant approach to it. What I'll do is I'll leave that on for a couple of seconds, Frank. That's your final sort of graphic. So that people can get a good look at that. And I'll make sure that that's also in the show notes. And then in a couple of seconds, I'll close that. And then I'll bring you and I front and center to go through any other salient points that we want to bring in. But just for the purposes of this one then, so Frank Cannon, chartered security professional from Optimal Risk, who's given freely of his time this morning. Very, very much appreciated. And before we go on, we're not finished yet, but before we go on and close this down, I think that approach, Frank, resonates with me. I'm not a security professional. It's not what I do for a living, but it makes sense to me, that multi-pronged approach, the layer system. I get that, and it makes sense, you know. So let's
Shall we talk a bit about, Rich, we skipped over about behavioural based security.
very much so, and
Yeah.
because it's something I'm really interested in. I've always had an interest in it from the health and safety perspective. I want to very briefly mention a friend of mine here in passing, Darren Sutton, Darren Sutton and Linda, his good lady Linda Barrett, they run behavioural safety services and training, BSST, and he does a lot of work, and he's well published and does some great training in behavioural safety for general, you know, health and safety stuff. So I'd be fascinated how it now transfers across into the world of security. So yeah, let's go into that, Frank, if we can, please.
So as a shameless plug for what I do in most of my day job is I create this thing. I can't, it's called the CAP way.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. This is a sort of folder of knowledge. Basically, this is my body of work.
Yes.
And I take this around and I use it to facilitate meaningful conversations where I can't remember everything. So I use this as like a series of aid memoirs, and I have you know, lots of this. I think this is number 51, but I have, hang about, that's better. This is 51, and this is about farmyard security, how to protect your farmyard, and it gives lots of advice. Some of the images that you've seen already on the screen, but what I do is I go around and I have conversations with people, and they are they're very much let's work out how we can do everything securely, so we don't have to do security. Right? Security tends to fall into the cost bracket of a farm. I've got to invest in new gates. I've got to invest in new this. I've got to buy this. Frank's telling me to do that, and it's not really the case if you get the right mindset. If you think secure all of the time. So if you're building something, you know, let's say that you're turning the barn into a restaurant. You know, Jeremy Clarkson's wet dream. But you know, you can't get planning permission. But if you were, then designing the security of that from the outset, and think like a security professional, because you understand, because you've studied, because you've got people in like me that help you understand the attack methodology. So do everything securely, because we want to create that secure culture. That means, unfortunately, that you take a bit of time to tether your quad bike to a fixed piece of infrastructure when you park it into the yard or in the barn, you know, and you're putting that another layer of defense in place so they can't just jump in. You actually take the keys out of your Land Rover when it's in the yard. That you use good quality padlocks. You know what? There's a thing called a key suited padlock. So you can buy one padlock. Sorry, you can buy multiple padlocks, but you have one key, and that one key could be a smart key. So if you lose it, leave it in the pub or whatever, then you can very quickly rekey, recode all of the padlocks to use that one key. So that's the thing that's on the market. So you're not traipsing around with a whole bunch of keys for every single building or vehicle that you want to secure or lock up. There's a thing called the poacher block, you know, and it's this thing here by Goodfellow Farming, right? This thing. And it's a fantastic device. Means that your high axled vehicles can go into your fields, but the Ford Transit van can't. Remember, the tools of the trade of the adversary is low axles. So you have to think outside the box. You think, right, I know how they work. What can I use to defend that doesn't cause me too much of a pain in the arse? Because you know, it's and this isn't so this isn't all about expensive infrastructure or technical systems that you have to invest in. This is common sense. So branding your vehicles, right? People will tell you to brand your vehicles. So what I mean by that is mark your vehicles in a unique way, so that if it's stolen, the police can retrieve it to you, or if it's so unique they won't take it because they
Yeah.
can't sell it. Right? Remember, they've got this business plan, where acquisitive crime business plan, where they take it from you because they've already sold it to somebody else, and they're just stealing to order, or
Yeah.
they'll steal things that they know they can shift pretty quickly. If yours looks different or is marked in a way that they can't sell it, they won't take it. They'll look at it and say, "Ah, shit," and leave it.
Exactly.
So you've got to think defense, and what we've got is you can do this with a punch, or you can do this with a marker pen, or you can do it with an engraver, or you can go onto the market and buy things like these. Selector DNA forensic marking kit. That for me cost me 60 quid, and it's marked every single piece of my property that I've got in my outhouse. I'm not a farmer, by the way. I've got Frank's little shed and a few bits of tools, but that's marked me secure by design. This is a policing endorsed product, Selector DNA. I think they're brilliant. There are other manufacturers out there, of course. Then you've got data tag, which is the ability to mark this one's a bike kit, but it could be a tractor kit or whatever. So there are out there, and what we're doing is we're using that concept that grandfather used, right? And you see them on all the westerns. They brand their animals to mark them as their property, and that's all we're doing. So where we used to brand the horse, we're now branding your tractor, which is 1,000 horses or more.
Yes.
So this isn't new concepts. This isn't new things. And there's an industry scheme called the CSAR scheme, construction and agricultural security registration scheme. That actually these people will give you 10% off your insurance premiums if you use a CSAR marked on your vehicles. There's trackers. You can put trackers in. There's so many different layers of that onion that are affordable and proportionate.
I think it's really interesting, and so that behaviour side of it. Then, I guess if I'm wrong, just getting people to stop and think about it initially, and often I encounter this very often, Frank, in my health and safety world, where I go and talk to farms and estates and agri-businesses. And I talk about the dangers of people being injured at work. And sometimes it's a really difficult thing to actually get people to buy into, when perhaps the farmer's been in farming for 60 years and he's never had an injury and he's never lost anything. And you're trying to preach to the guys who don't perceive it as a problem. And that's where that behavioural shift, I think, needs to happen. It's less so with the younger generations. I find in farming and agriculture now, they're very tech switched on and they're averse to new ideas and other smarter ways of protecting their assets. But it's again, that behavioural side that you've been talking about fascinates me, to try and get people just to maybe not do what they've always done, just do something slightly different that doesn't cost a load of money, doesn't take a lot of time, but just shifts the dial inside that onion a little bit and adds that additional protection, whether it's the deterrent or the time or the alert, whatever bit it impacts. Every little bit makes a big difference to the whole of that onion, as it were. So
I was speaking to a farmer about his diesel, and he'd had his diesel tank empty fully and partially on multiple occasions. And I said to him, why don't you try and protect it a little bit more? He said, well, if I lock it up, they'll just punch a hole in it and drain it out, and they'll take their whatever litres they want, and the rest of it will fall onto the floor. It's the old mentality that these organised crime gangs now will travel that distance to come and plan. You have to evolve at the same pace as the attack methodologies. That's why you need to understand how they think. Yeah. So, it might not be that you lock it all down physically. It might be that you just put barriers so that you only have to change their approach to it. Getting onto your farm. Remember, I said that they need these vehicles to get on and take your kit away. So stop the vehicle. And how do you do that? Dig a trench and berm. On top of the berm, put wooden palisade fencing and grow a fence, a thorny fence around it. So you still get that green aesthetic look. But you've created 3 different obstacles in that one design. You've got a hole that they've got to try and transcend with a vehicle. You've got a berm that they've got to get over it. Then they've got to walk through this wooden palisade fence, thorny hedgerow. And you can probably get and this is what I say in my article, actually, you can probably get a government grant to do this, so it costs jack shit, and you can get people to come and help you through some form of apprenticeship scheme.
Well, that leads really flows on wonderful to my next comment, actually, because I guess for anybody watching this now, and there's people watching now, and also those that go on to watch it later on both LinkedIn or YouTube, or indeed the Rural Crime Facebook page, which it will be shown on there as well. So if I'm a business, I'm an agricultural business or a landed estate or a farmer or something in the countryside with stuff that people want to nick, what makes me more vulnerable than Johnny a mile down the road? Why did they pick me? I think this is a really, but if we go through this is telling people how not to be that victim. So what are they looking for, Frank? What makes
it is vulnerable? So you've got to present defence. So I'm not saying go and live in a fort or go and live in a prison, because we still want to live in our beautiful countryside, but you've got to present defence. So firstly, they're going to look at you on the internet. They're going to see what they can see, and Google Maps helps them. It's a fantastic attack tool, right? So they'll look at what you've got, and then they'll start diving into your farm website to see whether they can see things in the background of all of your beautiful imagery that you present. Can you demonstrate that you've got CCTV in the background? Can you show out that you've got you've got a security mindset? And I'm not saying show them all where your cameras are, because that would be a folly as well. But it's about presenting. It's called security-minded communications. And there's some really good government websites that tell you all about that. But people like me would know that, and I would advise you. So, and then you've got to, so when they will find a way of walking close to your site. It's called a hostile reconnaissance. They will either walk through the public footpath that goes through your farm, which is it's not very good at all. It's not absolutely defensible against, but it's not good. Or they'll come up and have a look, and they might test you by knocking on your door and asking a few questions. But actually, what they're doing is looking around, and you've got to present this defense. So a lot of the security companies and the alarm companies will advocate that you present a sign or a badge of defense, and that's good today. You can buy them, and there's lots of different ways of communicating to people that are likely to come and have a look at your farm. Don't come here, don't bother, move along, there's nothing to see here, guys. And they do look at things like the quality of your padlocks, the quality of the insulation of your defensive systems. They do look at, they are surveillance aware, but they don't, if they can move to the next farm that hasn't got anything, then that's where they're going to go.
I think that's the key point. You've got to present, haven't you, that don't come looking at my kit. I'll be on to you, and you're going to get caught, basically. But you mentioned a couple of very interesting points I really do want to hone in on briefly. So we've just gone over the hour, so we'll probably start to taper this off. But you mentioned her as well earlier. So Kate Tudor, in one of her research projects, where she actually interviewed perpetrators of rural crime who had been caught, and actually got the opportunity to ask them questions. And one of the key questions she talked to them about, or asked them, was, is surveillance, is CCTV, is it a deterrent? And the answer was quite categorically, not really. Because like you said earlier, I'll just come in with my balaclava on, I'll have my skin will be covered up with gloves, and all you're going to get is pictures of me leaving. So that deterrence effect of CCTV wasn't particularly that good. I think also the thing that I picked up from your discussions, we're not talking about fly-by-night bozos here who think, I wonder what I can nick here. They're on the ball, aren't they? And the fact that they are engaging technical surveillance methodologies to look at you. You mentioned putting out your security on your website. That's a really good point, which I wouldn't have thought about. The one that I often see is where landowners and farmers, everyone wants to use social media, but again, that can work against you. I've just bought myself a new John Deere tractor, look at this. And those types of images, and we're off to such a farm show on Saturday, and we're going to be away for the week. People need to think, what you're telling your friends and others in your circles, you're also telling to the bad guys at the same time. So maybe a bit of savviness there might help out a little bit as well.
Rich, I think it's worth saying that everything we've discussed today, there's no rights or wrongs, mate. So I could advocate to you that let's show strength in your online posture, but others will tell you don't show any of your security equipment because they can work out and reverse engineer what you've got. This is a fine balance.
Exactly.
And each client or each family or each location that I help, it's nuanced, it's different every single time, but it's got to be based on those 4 principles of deter, detect, delay, respond. Let me just come on to something we could talk another hour, by the way, because you can tell I enthuse this.
But we're not going to close it down in any rush, because what's coming out here, Frank, is really interesting stuff. And I know it's going to be of great value to a lot of people. So let's go for it.
So I speak to people in the National Association of Agricultural Contractors. So these are people that you bring onto your farm. So you have a duty of care to make sure that they've got a safe place to work. This comes on, and they'll probably leave some of their equipment on your farm if they're working over a number of days. They may be living on your farm. So we've got to provide this safe place. So if we consider ourselves a business and a rural business community, we have to act like a business, and we have to take that corporate responsibility. And you've got to pass this thing called the reasonable persons test or reasonable persons standard. This is a piece of tort law that says if you're in a court, a criminal court, or God forbid, a coroner's court, and somebody passed on your farm, and they believe that you could have done something more to safeguard them. This could be health and safety, it could be adversarial risk. If you could have done something more, you're probably liable for that. But more importantly, it's about you and your family, because you live on your farm. This is a way of life. This isn't just a business for me, but it is a business. So let's look at what some of the other businesses, how they approach their protecting their business and increasing that level of confidence that they can deliver on their business plan. Right. So what they do is they don't. What they don't do is they don't rely on the police to protect their businesses. Right. So Tesco's don't have a cop at the front door. Tesco's wouldn't expect the cop to come into their store and give them crime reduction advice on how to set out their store to reduce the likelihood of shoplifting. Right. They employ people, they take guidance off professionals to better understand the adversarial risk and how to protect. Right. But all I hear on many different forums and websites and programs and articles and newspaper articles is that people in the rural communities, the rural businesses, criticize the police for not protecting their business premises, aka their farms. So I'm with you. I understand. But so we have to have this change of mindset, and it needs to be this converged approach of private advice, guidance from professionals like myself. And here I am, I'm selling my services, but I'm not really. I'm sort of trying to paint the picture. Yeah. So we do need to do things differently, right? So I think, somebody more intelligent than me said doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome is barking. Hence the reason Gareth Southgate changed his formation on Saturday night when we won the football on penalty.
Exactly.
You have to make a change to get a different outcome. And at the moment, the outcome is vulnerability, fear of crime, victim of crime, constant barracking or not barracking, but criticizing the police. The police haven't got the right resource or right support to be able to put people into your communities to protect you 100%. And the rural policing teams are really, really good people, and I speak to many of them. They are absolute devoted professionals who are constrained by one arm or both arms tied behind their backs because their governors, their skippers and governors don't allow them to be at the right place at the right time to defeat the criminal, because it ain't at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday morning having a cup of tea in your yard when you're most vulnerable.
No, exactly. You're quite right.
It's at 2 o'clock on a on a Friday morning or Saturday morning, or like Richard said, when they know you're at the local rural show, they're going to be in there because they're vermin that feed off vulnerability. So you need to do something. You need to do something different to what you've been doing for many, many years to change that dial. And what I would advocate is a private-public partnership. So I know Richard does, and we try to at Optimal Risk is to get into these organisations, whether it be the CLA or whether it be the NAAC or TIAH or NLC, they've all got an acronym, but you get into there and offer this meaningful and affordable advice that doesn't expect you to go and spend millions on technical or physical security, but it expects you to do something to protect your space. And you live, work, rest, and play there. And so do your children, and so do your elderly parents. So you have to have this sense of obligation, this liability, this culpability, this responsibility to create this safe place.
No, you do. It's really important. It so is. And
sorry, mate, I'm getting a little bit.
No, that's absolutely great. No, but the thing
this is my job. This is how I live.
This is why I was so chuffed when you agreed to come on, because this is the kind of stuff. It's slightly different to the normal and general way of thinking, which is really important because, and there's a really good reason why perhaps a shift and a change is required. Because if we look at rural crime statistics, if you go back over the last 10 years, there hasn't the publication. Okay, so it's a well-known insurance brand who does the annual rural crime surveys, predominantly amongst its own customer base. It's a brilliant. I think it's brilliant, by the way. I use it all the time. So if you were to go back to the last 10 years of those, you don't see any change. So the numbers fluctuate slightly, and 1 year it might be 47 million, the next year it might be 50, but it's always going to be around 45 to 53 million quid every year. So that tells me that something does need to be different. So people do need to think differently, and perhaps there are other ways, and it does involve partnerships and it involves collaboration. But you hit it right on the head earlier on. What it really requires is all of that going on one hand, but me, the landowner, me, the farmer, me, the agribusiness, I need to say, right, I need to protect me, my family, and my assets, my viability, my operational viability as a business. I need to do that. So therefore, and you said it, stop and look at myself as if I were a criminal. So what am I going to do? Where's the vulnerabilities? Identify them and plug them. I'm guessing along the way, this is where people like your good self, Frank, come into your own, because you need that competent level of advice that's backed up with that experience of the sector. I think that's really important, that people, when they're engaging security advice, do your due diligence. What's the background? What's the experience? And am I going to get offered a load of products, technological brilliance that's actually going to make me more vulnerable and give me a false sense of security? So some of the points are absolutely brilliant that you've brought into this chat, Frank, and I am very, very grateful for that. So
just to round that up, and I know we need to close as well. And I've just had I just had a notification that my next meeting is waiting as well. So, but it's about turning common sense into common behaviours, right? And the challenge with common sense is it's not always applied. And what I do is I help facilitate a conversation, and 9 times out of 10, the person I'm speaking to will create their own solution, will create their own answer, because it is common sense. It's just then, does the level of effort to apply that common sense behavior, does it take more than the not doing it? right? And you know, I'm a long-time soldier, as I told you before, and my first 10 years was about fighting terrorism, predominantly from an Irish background. And when they took out the Brighton bomb, when they took out the Grand Hotel, and they nearly killed this then Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, and they did kill others. The terrorists said, we just have to be lucky once. You have to be lucky all of the time.
Exactly.
And this is a really good strap line to work on in our war communities. We have to do things the same way every time, because the time we don't do it that way, somebody will get in. So you've got to balance this level of effort. Do I get off the tractor and shut the gate every night as I go into the yard, or do I not bother? And then can I not sleep because I know that the gate's open and somebody might come in? So what's the price of you having a trouble-free night sleep, so you're fit, strong and healthy to do the next day's work in a hazardous environment, by the way? So it could be that you didn't sleep very well the night before, that you leave your hand in the baler. And now you haven't got that arm, and we see this time and time again, unfortunately. But it is that common sense approach, and you just gotta sometimes check yourself and say, am I doing the right thing? And I know money's tight, and I know time is precious as well, and I know you need to eke out that time to be with your family and to enjoy hobbies, because your mental health is as important as that quad bike.
Exactly.
So we know how challenging it is to live in that isolated world of single, especially the succession farmers, where you're probably the only farmer in that vast piece of land tending that flock. But you know, I would urge of you, and you can speak to whoever you like, but I would urge of you to seek advice on how to protect your most critical assets. That's the family, and those things you need to deliver your business plan.
That's the way to think of it, because that's what it is ultimately. People being effectively terrorized in their own patch, their castle, their home, their farm, their estate. So Frank, in closing, I want to say thank you to you, thank you to Optimal Risks. I'm very, very appreciative of the time that you've given this morning to give out some really, really useful, brilliant and engaging and informative information and insights into what's going on in the rural crime world from your perspective, and I'm truly grateful for that. What I'm going to do, Frank, I'm going to close. If you're able to stay for a couple of seconds, so you and I can just have one quick word. I'm going to close your feed now. You're off. You're no longer live. And in closing, just to reiterate what I said to Frank there, I can still see Frank in the green room there. Thank you so much to Frank Cannon, Chartered Security Professional. Thank you very much to everybody at Optimal Risk. I'll make sure there are links to all of your contact details within the YouTube descriptor. That will be done within the next 10 or 15 minutes or so. So thank you to everybody. If you're watching this now, thank you to those who watch live, or indeed you watch later. I have a couple of requests for you. If you watch on the YouTube channel, Rural Crime Prevention, may I please ask that you subscribe to the channel and set the little alert bell and be alerted when we do future talks. My hope is to develop this channel, to build it up and bring in excellent guests like the one we've just had there, so people like Frank can share with the wider community their experiences and knowledge that they have about rural crime and how the criminals target people, attack people and get rid of the goods afterwards, leaving those victims behind. And I think that's the key thing to end on, is this is all about protection of people and their families and their viability as operational businesses. It's not just a quad bike that gets stolen, or the GPS unit off a tractor, or a leaf blower, or a John Deere lawnmower. This is vital equipment for people's businesses. If I lose my tractor and I lose my GPS unit, I maybe not be able to work for 4, 5, 6 days. The kit may well be insured, but we're missing the point. If we're reliant upon insurance as our risk mitigation and risk transfer mechanism, we're really missing a big trick, because you're still going to get the heartache and the nightmare scenario that you've been violated, victimized, had all your stuff stolen, and left feeling vulnerable, anxious, and very, very stressed at the end of it. So that's me. That's Richard Wade from Rural Crimes. Thank you so much for watching. Reach out to contact us, and if you would like to appear on this show, please get in touch. I'll be delighted to hear from you. Thank you, and